So a California governor with presidential aspirations is proposing what would become the 28th Amendment to enshrine gun control into the Constitution. No, this is not undoing the Second Amendment. This is basically just the gun control amendment. In the amendment, the governor is calling for, among many other things that we'll talk about, a ban on the purchase of so-called assault weapons. You know, those things that are not weapons of war and kill less people in the United States each year than, to name just a few things, hammers, fists, knives, constipation, as well as autoerotic asphyxiation. But man, does it give the anti-self-defense advocates out there a serotonin hit on par with heroin. Also, it's apparently good for fundraising, otherwise I assume he and other politicians would not be doing it. And at the end of the day, why would we follow the science by letting inconvenient facts, evidence, and statistics to get in the way of a cool narrative that raises money? What is the proposed 28th Amendment, as well as how could it happen? Guys, let's get into it. So the 20th Amendment, this is the amendment that they will try to basically permanently enshrine gun control into the United States Constitution. And importantly, they're not taking away the Second Amendment. Evidently, there must be a political calculation that that's just a bridge too far. That's unachievable. But somehow, someway, they think that they can pull off the 28th Amendment to enshrine quote-unquote common sense gun control. More on that in a moment. So let's look at broadly what are the basically 5 different areas that the governor's trying to hit. Number 1 is to increase the purchase age from 18 to 21 for all firearms. Now, you may recall, and a little bit of history here, that the Gun Control Act of 1968 made it illegal for federal firearms license dealers to sell handguns to individuals under the age of 21. We also did a video not too long ago, linked in the description box below, where a federal district court struck that down as being unconstitutional. Short version as to why. Basically, it falls outside the United States tradition of regulating firearms. You see, it wasn't until basically the middle 1800s when a couple states basically said it's illegal to sell handguns to children. And at the time, children were under the age of 21. So in effect, it was, well, you can't sell handguns to minors, i.e. folks under the age of 21. But of course, as we all know, the age majority, that's the age where we legally recognize an individual. Of course, not for things like alcohol or maybe cigarettes and things like that, but at least in the broader sense of the term, the age of majority got lowered from 21 to 18, but you still cannot sell a handgun to someone under the age of 21 unless, of course, Gun Control Act, this particular provision gets struck down. So they're looking to raise the overall age from 18 to 21. Number 2, universal background checks. So this has been a long provision that the antis have been going for because, as we all know, it's the precursor step to the registry, and registration is the precursor step to confiscation. You don't believe me? Look at every single country where they have banned firearms, you know, Nazi Germany, among other different places, and it always starts with registration. As I recall, I think Adolf Hitler gave a speech to this effect, bragging about universal registration back in, I think it was 1934. Someone fact check that, though, in the comments section. I'm just going off memory. So universal background check. You know, those things to close that ugly, evil, so-called gun show loophole, which accounts for less than 1% of all firearms that have been used in some sort of crime or homicide. And by the way, that number's not going up. That number has been cut in half since the late 90s. But apparently, we absolutely have to solve that problem. And of course, recognizing that that statistically is not a problem is exactly why both myself and many others are very cynical about what's really the goals here. The goal here is registration. But of course, there is no registration without universal background check. Also, I'll just throw out there, as well as a former state prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, I have spoken to a lot of people, both in the past as well as on an ongoing basis, who just call the office looking to retain our services, even though we represent good people on a bad day. I've talked to lots of different folks who have purchased or acquired, let's say, firearms in order to use for criminal purposes. Out of the plurality of ways that these folks get their firearms, by far the most common is that they're stolen, although a portion of them do buy them through FFLs, which of course would solve nothing. But I don't know really what you want to do here, because if somebody's not willing to go to an FFL, it's usually because they're going to be denied a background check. So they're buying it off the street. So the person who's going to go use their firearm in an armed robbery or homicide is really going to be worried about violating universal background check law. That just doesn't add up at all. You want to talk about common sense? There is no common sense to that. But just the same, universal background check is number 2. Number 3, a waiting period. So this is the period that theoretically, if you're really angry, you're hot to trot, you want to do something, you want to commit violence. So obviously you're going to go down to your local gun store, you're going to fill out your 4473, you're going to purchase your firearm, and then you're going to immediately go out there and do violence. Well, I'm sure statistically that has happened. I have never seen a case in my practice where that has actually happened. If people don't have a firearm, if they don't have a weapon and they're intent on doing violence, they will go out there and get it one way or the other. You know, like drugs. It's kind of like drugs. There's no universal background check for drugs. Drugs are generally illegal when we're talking about Schedule 1 for the most part, leaving cannabis to the side. But, you know, people just have a way of finding heroin, of finding crack cocaine, of finding things like that. I wonder if, and I realize I'm bridging kind of number 2 and 3 universal background checks and waiting period, but I wonder if we could actually solve the war on drugs by instituting a universal background check for drugs. What do you guys think about that? Let me know in the comment field below. But waiting period. So this is the whole concept that, look, so you make your purchase, you have to leave it at the gun store, and then you have to come back some period of time later, whether that's a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week, a month, whatever the case may be. You have to have that cooling period before you come back in case you're hot to trot. Of course, the flip side of the coin is that if you are a single mom being stalked by an ex-boyfriend or something like that, and all of a sudden you're concerned that someone's going to do you violence, there had been documented cases where those victims could not acquire the tools of self-defense. As the old expression goes, God created man and Sam Colt made them all equal. That's right, because a firearm, you can overcome being deficient as far as having upper body strength or lacking enough upper body strength to take on multiple military-aged males who may be invading your home or something like that. But ignoring all those, again, problems with the fact that this law has literally killed people in the past, we want to see a waiting period in the 20th Amendment, I guess. So they want to see a waiting period. Number 4, the AWB, the assault weapons ban. Now, I already talked about this in the introduction, but as we've seen in different states, whether it's Illinois or elsewhere, the ways that they go about this is they'll basically institute banning a whole bunch of firearms by name, as well as a whole bunch of firearms basically by features. So if it has a pistol grip, if it can accept a detachable magazine, if it has, God forbid, a flash suppressor or some sort of muzzle compensation device or whatever else the case may be, maybe it has a telescoping stock, so on and so forth, then if it has enough features or perhaps any of those features, then by golly, it's now a so-called assault weapon. This, of course, ignores not only the weight of history as well as common sense, because to my knowledge, I don't know any military that issues an AR-15, although I'm sure someone somewhere has done it. But of course, an AR-15 is not the same thing as an M4 or an M16. These are entirely different things. But again, why follow the science? Why let statistics, facts, and reason get in the way of something that makes cool fundraising, right? Now, the governor also calls for, as part of the assault weapons ban, as a means of basically a litmus test on these weapons, quote, and I'm going to read this, that serve no other purpose than to kill as many people as possible in a short amount of time. Weapons of war our nation's founders never foresaw, end quote. Wow, so much derp to unpack here. So again, none of these are weapons of war, all right? Semi-automatic weapons are just not what's issued in the military. You can just basically start there. So they're technically wrong, just at basis, at flatline. Also, let's talk about this weapons of war that our nation's founders never foresaw. Did our nation's founders ever foresee the internet, wireless devices, all these other sorts of things? You know, I like to bring up and analogize, well, frankly, things in general, but I like to compare Second Amendment to First Amendment oftentimes. So by this reasoning, would the California governor basically support a ban on all printing press that wasn't done with the same technology that was done, say, certainly in the early Republic era? So kind of early 1800s, basically the time of the founding fathers. So let's just do away with, Kindles. Let's do away with the internet. Let's do away with social media, because none of that, after all, has First Amendment protections. What about every new religion or denomination that was founded post-New Early Republic era? right? Because the founding fathers never foresaw anything like that, right? I wonder if they foresaw all the different religions that people would bring with them when they migrated to the United States. So are we going to be banning just everything that the founding fathers didn't foresee? Is that really the constitutional test that these folks are now advocating for, that they're inventing? It seems that way, but I hope not. So guys, before I get to the very important number 5 that you're definitely going to want to stick around for, I want to let you know that we're going to be releasing a whole separate video, because I don't want to give it short shrift, a whole separate video talking about what an Article 5 constitutional convention would look like. That's basically the means that the California governor is calling for in order to actually implement the 28th Amendment here. I didn't want to cover it in 10 seconds. I've unpacked a lot of interesting stuff. We're going to be putting up that video hopefully in the next couple days. Stick around. You're not going to want to miss that. As for our normal call to action here, guys, if you like this sort of video, if you like this sort of content, click like. It not only tells the algorithm, let this video get out there, show it to more people, it also tells us that this is the sort of content you'd like to see. Also, in case you're unaware, full-time video producers, I'm pointing to Derek behind the camera, as well as the camera itself, Derek's waving, by the way, all of this stuff costs money. So if you want to be able to help support the channel, please consider becoming a member. You get all sorts of cool perks, as well as access to our private live streams as well. We have a hangout coming up next week for casual Q&A chat. Looking forward to that as well. And now back to number 5. They basically want to destroy the 14th Amendment as not applying to the Second Amendment. What's the 14th Amendment? The 14th Amendment is the amendment that was passed shortly after the United States Civil War in the late 1860s, which basically means that all the other amendments apply to the states. So in other words, prior to the 14th Amendment, the federal government was not allowed to pass any sort of law that was too onerous or would restrict the First Amendment rights to gather, for free speech, for free practice of religion, and so forth. But theoretically, a state or local municipal government could absolutely do any or all of the above, because again, the Constitution was only a check on the federal government power, not the state government power. So wasn't it just ever so surprising to see that, oh yeah, basically they want to take out the 14th Amendment as applying to the Second Amendment here, which would now enable every little town, village, county, as well as state to basically do virtually whatever they want, so long as it can be shown to save a life, which could be virtually anything. We could probably ban cars and save lives, or at a minimum, we could certainly insist that manufacturers need to significantly increase their safety features to a point where we could at least save one life. Why doesn't Congress do that? If that's our new reasoning, why not do that? Why don't we just pass a law that says that you're not allowed to manufacture any car, and then we insert one little safety tweak here? Because Lord knows that would be very easy to do. But of course, why let science and facts and statistics and reasoning get in the way of this if we have an opportunity to fundraise and ban guns, right? Right. At the end of the day, theoretically, this is being sold as gun control is always being sold. It's being sold as common sense. It has broad support. And look, the facts and science are on our side. And in reality, there is no facts and science on their side. And I can't tell you how many videos I've done and we have coming up on this exact same topic. So guys, if you haven't already done so, please consider clicking subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of those videos. We have another video coming up that will be going through how the Article 5 convention would actually play out, which is what the governor is polling for here as well. So that would be the implementation of how this amendment would actually be introduced and would go into effect. Be sure you don't miss that. It's coming right out. Thank you for sticking around this long, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.